Hello there, it's Tom here, and this is Chapter 23 of Gunnerkrigg Court, Terror Castle of the Jupiter Moon Martians. This chapter starts off kind of similar to the previous Dr. Disaster chapter where Annie, Smitty and Parley are in a simulation. And here we can see that Parley is super into this kind of stuff. We get the indication that she enjoys doing physical things, because she's quite tall and strong, and when we first come across her we see that she's quite good with a sword too. But the whole simulation is cut short thanks to Andrew's powers. And after it's all over and they come out of the imaging chamber, we see that Renard and Jones are talking a little bit. Now, there was a lot of speculation as to Jones' outfit here. The fact that she was wearing this pink neck scarf. People were trying to figure out as to whether it was some clue as to her identity or her past or her backstory or something, but it's just part of her character that sometimes she'll wear clothes with an accented colour or something to just draw attention to her. Like this outfit, for example, it's just a normal grey suit, but the bright pink neck scarf draws attention to her face and head. So other than giving some indication as to Jones' thought process when she dresses, it's not really hiding some big secret. We also see that Jones is pretty good at diffusing situations here. Old Dr. Disaster comes in and he's sorry that the simulation was messed up, and Parley was giving Smitty a hard time about ruining it for them. But Jones puts them both at ease, complimenting both their skills. Now, another thing I wanted to get across in this chapter is the relationship between Smitty and Parley. I kind of like the idea that Smitty, who is kind of a timid person and sort of a pushover, be very upfront with Annie that he thinks that Parley is super hot, basically. But while he thinks that, he just assumes that Parley's always teasing him and doesn't really consider him anything more than a kid since he is in the year below her. And Parley herself, with her body language in this, I tried to show that not only was she always finding an excuse to touch Smitty in some way or lean on him or grab him and stuff like that, but also the way that she stands and composes herself when he's around. She's always sticking her hips out or standing with her back straight or basically showing herself off in front of him. Whereas whenever I draw Annie, she's just kind of standing there slouching, just as anybody would if they're standing around. And Annie's spaceman uniform, for example, doesn't fit particularly well. It's kind of baggy around the arms. But Parley's one, it's obviously shows off her figure a bit more. And this is something that Renard brings up. The fact that Parley is always showing herself off in front of Smitty. I think I also like the idea that the two of them are basically in denial that they like each other so much, and Parley herself wouldn't even understand that she likes Smitty in a certain way. She just gets some kind of morbid pleasure out of giving him a hard time. I guess that idea appealed to me because it's kind of a reversal of what you'd normally see. And while the two of them are very touchy-feely with each other, they're basically oblivious to how they look to everyone else. And even here, when Parley's kind of complaining that it's a foregone conclusion that Annie's going to become the medium of the forest, and Jones suggests that she could just give up and stop attending these classes, she gives a brief glance over at Smitty, because she knows that if she was to stop coming to these classes, she may not interact with them anymore, since they're in different years. So anyway, they head off into another simulation, and we get to see basically an artistic representation of a meeting of the court founders and a lot of the animals in the forest. And some of the figures we see here, Annie recognizes Diego from the picture in Kat's robot tomb. And this scene is basically a vehicle for me to convey some of the backstory of the beginnings of the court, as far as the court is aware of it, to the reader, but in an environment where Jones is instructing the kids as part of their class. And while they're talking about the history and discussing certain things, we see that Jones is up to something by handing out these flowers to the kids. And this is one of the reasons I like Jones, in that it's very difficult to guess her motivations, because she's basically blank of any expression. Her character is still very blunt and forthcoming, and she's not retiring in any way. Oh, I should add, I think one thing that I didn't do too well was convey the fact that a few chapters ago when we saw the robots fighting in the robot tomb, I don't think I made it very clear that the larger robot that was dispatched by the original S1 model was basically a representation of Sir Young from here. Here I just straight up drew them both on the same panel and hoped that people would recognize that Diego had made this sort of fake fight between the two of them, but I think I probably should have expanded on that and made it a bit more obvious. But either way, we learned that Diego is known to have created the court robots, and that Sir Young is the original protector of the court, the role of which has passed down to Eglamour. So back with Jones, we see that she's giving Smitty another flower and then casually nudging him towards Parley, which causes Parley to display her power for the first time, which is the ability to teleport, basically. Embarrassingly enough, teleporting everybody to not only her bedroom, but straight onto her bed. Besides Renard making fun and Parley subsequently kicking everyone out of her room, Jones does talk about the fact that her abilities of teleporting could be very useful. And we see here that Jones basically tried to force Parley and Smitty into a situation where Parley's emotions might reveal what her powers are. And this part here, when Annie's asking about the flowers that Dr. Disaster has given her, Annie initially thinks that it's part of her plan to reveal Parley's powers, but it turns out that that's not the case, and Jones knows full well that Dr. Disaster is smitten with her because she understands that she's a very attractive woman. And these are just small hints as to Jones's personality. We also see that Jones is perfectly fine letting Annie investigate some of the things that she finds at the court herself, instead of forcing her to reveal any information that she's found about Jean or stuff that they've been up to. She's perfectly willing to outright say to Annie that she doesn't need to tell her anything unless she's fully comfortable doing so. And one of the things that Jones often does when she's teaching or interacting with Annie or Parley and Smitty is she tries to instill independence in the children. She's made it clear in the past that she's not affiliated with the court officially, and so her lessons never really involve saying that they have to do what the court says. And with that lesson over, Bernard and Annie head back, and this panel here is the underpass in Birmingham city centre that I used to walk through every day to work. We have a little talk where Annie says that she doesn't really think about boyfriends and that kind of thing. And Bernard lets slip that he understands that the way Annie acts outwardly is just a facade, really, that she tries to be stoic and stone-faced, but that really inside, just like her mother, she's quite fiery and has a quick temper. But Annie avoids the topic. And during the conversation, old Jackie Boy pops in. He's looking a little tired since we last saw him. He's just sloping about with his friends. And here he starts to talk about Zimmy. But here we see that he's walking towards Annie as he's asking her these questions, and she's backed up against the wall. I don't know if I showed that very well in terms of motion to the panels, but I did love drawing this panel here with Renard's big ol' angry face and a flower on his head. And we see that Jack, even though he's confronted with a pretty weird situation here, he shrugs it off and walks away, leaving the two kind of bewildered at what just went on. And we'll be seeing more of Jackie Boy in the future, of course. But back with Dr. Disaster. Since Parley teleported everybody out of the simulation, from his point of view it looks like that they have disappeared somehow, and he's got no idea what's going on. But Jones returns and recommends that they watch a movie together, which is something that Dr. Disaster hinted at doing earlier in the chapter. And she knows full well that one of his favourite movies is The Tingler, which is one of my favourite movies with Vincent Price. And this led a lot of people to think that maybe the two of them were dating, but that's not really the case. Again, this is one of the things I like about Jones, is that because she's not showing any outward emotion, it's very difficult to guess at just what her motivations are. And here it's just showing that she's remembered that he asked if she wanted to watch a movie with him, and so she's come back to take him up on the offer. And that's it for that chapter. Come back for chapter 24, Residential.